All right, people, we are here to kick off March Madness. No, that is not March Madness in terms of the American sports. I'm talking about March Madness in the sense of this is a very rare instance. It's going to be tricky. It's going to be difficult, but I think that we could pull it off here at the Talkin TV family. I'm joined once again by my good friend and co-host Luk of Luk Reviews, and in order to kind of break down what March Madness will be, I will explain. We will be doing a double topic podcast every single weekend of March, and we're kicking it off this weekend with the premiere. I'm calling it the Battle of the Threes, the premiere of the third season of The Mandalorian, along with the release of possibly, I think, nobody's most anticipated threequel, Creed 3, but I think surprised a lot of people. Luke, you got any thoughts before we get this started?
No, I just know that I enjoyed one a lot more than the other.
Me too, definitely. All of that and more in today's episode of the Talkin TV podcast. What's up, people? Welcome back to yet another episode of the Talkin TV podcast. I am, of course, Dom, the movie nerd, joined once again by Luk of Luk Reviews, and this is the beginning of March Madness, where we will be tackling a double podcast every single weekend. Luke, I just want to take a second to break down just the amount of stuff that we are going to be getting this month in March. It is insane, to say the least. So just to give you guys a little look-see ahead as far as what the schedule is entailed, we're covering Mandalorian and Creed 3 today. Next weekend, I will be joined by Kristen and Dustin in order to break down the release of Scream 6, as well as the final 5 episodes of You Season 4. And the weekend after that, we will be breaking down Shazam! Fury of the Gods, along with the release of the third and possibly final season of Ted Lasso. And then we'll be wrapping up the month with John Wick Chapter 4 and the premiere of Succession's fourth and final season. I think it's fitting that the month begins with a battle of the threes and ends with a battle of the fours before we transition into April. And that's just what we've got on the podcast docket. As far as other stuff that we've got going on, we also had the release of the Amazon miniseries Daisy Jones and the Six. The first 3 episodes of that premiered on Amazon yesterday. We also will have the premiere of Yellow Jackets Season 2, another Amazon original called The Power, Extrapolations on Apple TV Plus. And as far as movies go, we have 65, we have Champions. We got a lot of stuff coming this month. I'm going to be amazed if we're able to cover half of it. But needless to say, we're kicking off the month with 2 big properties of 2 things that kind of very much reared in the second half of the last decade and have had interesting journeys up until this point. Luke, I think it's safe to say that we were very much looking forward to one and didn't necessarily have any expectations for the other. And this is yet another one of those scenarios where those 2 have been like kind of flipped. I mean, at least that's my thoughts. I don't know about you, but
I guess I was the opposite. I was very much looking forward to the punch up and not so much to the other one because because after Andor, you kind of think, oh, well, they're not going to be able to do that again with the Mandalorian with their very episodic format. I was watching the Mandalorian thinking this could be a really good video game. Like, what's very funny? Level based.
You know what's funny that you say that, because I feel like that's what a lot of people have saying, not just about this season, but like since the beginning of the show, which where the Mandalorian, and it's weird because that does kind of tie back into a discussion that you and I had previously about kind of how video games and video game storytelling are starting to seep their way into modern day properties. Because you're right, it's so weird because The Mandalorian is like this groundbreaking, gigantic property. It's the first ever live action Star Wars TV show. It's the kickoff, the incentive for people to get into Disney Plus back in 2019. But the structure of the show and the storytelling device with which they employ, it feels like it's constantly been the biggest thing that it's had going against it. I remember when Chris and I covered it back when it first released. It was one of our first ever podcast episodes back in November 2019. And we were both like, very, very much split on it. For me, I know I was very positive towards it because for me, just the fact that we got something that was different than rather disappointing Star Wars movie after disappointing Star Wars movie, not only just a different approach to the story, but a different approach to almost the genre, right? Because we had always been so used to that one version of Star Wars, and then Rogue One kind of showed, okay, this is how we can kind of take this in a different direction. And Mandalorian continued to prove that, with, again, like this episodic Western adventure that is kind of just a series of quests that the character has to complete. The character is completely masked. So aside from the few times that Pedro Pascal actually shows up on set and actually takes off the helmet off, you can actually like what's going. There isn't really anything to latch onto, so you can kind of like almost imagine yourself as the character as they're going on the little side missions, along with the Disney the Disney plush toy that they throw in there in order to make everybody buy the toys with the Grogu character. And so as time has gone on, right, you had season 2 come out right in the midst of the pandemic where we really had nothing else going on. So I feel like that might have been why people were a little bit more positive leaning towards it, as far as, that being the season where we got the legacy characters back, because season 1, for the most part, was all original characters. We saw a few familiar locations, but for the most part, it was original characters. It was original locations, places that we'd never seen or been before. And then season 2, that's when they start bringing the Clone Wars legacy characters. That's when we get Ahsoka. That's when we get Bo-Katan. That's when we get, that's when we get Boba Fett. That's when we get Luke, And then it leads into kind of the second wave of Star Wars nostalgia that we got last year in 2022. Well, actually, you know what? Let me take a step back, because first we have 2021, where, with the exception of Bad Batch, we get no new Star Wars content. And then we move into 2022, which is when Star Wars officially makes its return with Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, and Andor. And that's when we're just like officially back in legacy fill. So I guess the reason why I was looking forward to Mandalorian this season, A, it was the fact that it had been so long since the last season, but B, it was the fact that as good as Andor was, it was still a legacy character that we already knew of, and it worked as well as it did because they actually had a really, really good creative behind it with Tony Gilroy. But I'm like, we're falling back into the same old tropes. We're still getting the same old Star Wars characters that we know, that with Book of Boba and with Obi-Wan. Like, at the very least, I'm like, I wanted to see some more original stuff, because Favreau and Filoni have hinted at many times that they are using the expanded Mandalorian verse to kind of do exactly what Filoni did with the Clone Wars animated show, which is kind of fill in the gaps and kind of do some corrections on the movies that people were not really that big a fan of. So that's personally why I was looking forward to it. And so we got the first episode this past Wednesday, chapter 17, The Apostate. And it's weird because it's another situation like Ant-Man, where I'm not exactly, every one of the criticisms are not wrong, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know, they don't affect me as much, because it's nothing new that people haven't been saying for years. It's always that weird situation where it's like people are critiquing something the same way every single time it comes out, but they like it until they don't. Like, I don't know, maybe you can shed some light on that, because that's always a phenomenon that kind of confuses me in this Disney-controlled era of media that we live in.
Yeah, that's a very good point, that people complain about it, but they still love it. I think where I might have that is Stranger Things. I think every finale is just 11 yells at a thing with her hand in front of her, and the power of love wins. But I still go back to it every time, very excited. They'll probably do that for the 5th one, right? Just
probably.
But we'll watch it anyway.
Exactly.
But yeah, The Mandalorian, I just posted it on my story like after the episode finished. It's not Andor, but it's fun. It's harmless. It's a space adventure with, just a good time with a little funny green dude.
Right, with a little funny green dude that is getting expressively more and more attention as time goes on. And yeah, it's weird because like you said, the point about this being a video game, like that's kind of in a strange way, that's the exact reason why people liked it. It's like people criticize it for a video game, but it's like I'm like, yeah, but for I feel like for strange reasons, it's like, because again, this is another instance where I feel like we have to differentiate between like the Twitter crowd versus the regular people who like and watch this stuff. Because I still remember when Mandalorian season 2 was airing at the height of COVID, and when I was working at the Gap, and I would overhear other people talking about it, and for them it was just like, yeah, it's like they're like, Star Wars was back. And the fact of the matter was, it was them, and I'm talking like these are people in like their 50s and 60s, keep in mind too, but these are people who still pretty much were only familiar with Star Wars from the movies and were very, very much disappointed by the new movies that we got. But the fact that they were getting the characters that they were familiar with, they almost didn't really care about the story. It was just that, like you said, they were getting like kind of this weekly adventure, which like I said, it's in a strange way kind of gets back to the origins of television. I remember this was something that Chris and I debated all the time, because Chris is not a fan of that style of television at all. And I understand why. I'm not a fan of that style of television either. It's a reason why I stopped watching NCIS with my family after years, because I finally realized that it was the same thing over and over again. But with this, it's the fact that my problems with the show are not necessarily with the format, it's how they implement the story, because the story it's not bad. It is enjoyable, but it's the fact that because they have such this simplistic approach to it, it always feels like it detracts from what could be interesting, which is, and that kind of is where the video game style comes from, where it's like, hey, Mando's got to do this thing, but first he's got to go to another planet to get this thing in order to complete this one side mission, so he can move on to the next phase of this thing. And then he has to do, and then it gets way late and attacked by some Jawas. And then he's got to go and do this other thing. So like that sort of stuff is where I'm like, I get where everyone's coming from. That stuff kind of bothers me. But I don't know, it's the fact that, like I said, it is the simplistic approach. It is the fact that, again, because the character is, for the most part, a blank slate, you can pretty much graft yourself onto them. It is the fact that it is so well shot, the fact that the action is always on point, But like you said, it's the fact that I think the difference with the first two seasons and now is that the first two seasons had relatively little to no competition in the Star Wars verse. They were really the only things worth watching on Disney Plus, because the crazy thing too, and I completely forgot this, is that Mandalorian predates Marvel even on Disney Plus, because Mandalorian season 2 finished airing a couple weeks before WandaVision came out. And so we've had, the difference is that now with this new season, we've had all of this new Disney Plus content. We've had 8 different Marvel shows. We have 2 Star Wars animated shows. We've had 3 other live action Star Wars shows, all of which have been to varying different degrees of success. So it's kind of, again, exactly what I was talking about with a lot of people, which is where, again, it is the Disneyification, franchiseification, which has now come to television, which for the most part had remained kind of free of that, and now you're seeing it with all these other franchises, not just with the Disney stuff. You're seeing it on HBO with the Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, how they're essentially how HBO is trying to essentially turn their entire canon into franchises and spinoffs. You have that with AMC, obviously, with Better Call Saul. You have that in the animated verse. Netflix is trying to hop on that with the Avatar. But franchiseification has come to TV now in a way that it really didn't exist before. So this is kind of the new landscape of television that we're living in. As far as the varying degrees of success, I mean, as you have the people who are going to be wringing their hands and be like, oh, I hate franchises. Why can't we just get original stuff? And then you have the other people who are going to be completely devoted and will tune in to watch every single new thing from their respective franchises, regardless of their quality, because they don't care, because it's based off the thing that they like. And so therefore nothing that they make can possibly be bad. And then there's people like me who are just going to take what they get, understand that this is the current media landscape, and they're going to critique them individually as they come out, because they are definitely going to be of varying degrees of quality. I don't know. What's really your thought on that, as far as like which of those 3 parties that I just outlined do you really fall into?
So like, in regards to the franchising TV?
Yeah.
Well, I guess we have to take into account that nowadays TV is the meta. Back in the day, you had the movie actors and the TV actors, and the TV wasn't really considered anything all that prestige. But nowadays, if you're on a HBO show, you're like, ooh, you're the top dog. Like look at HBO. Like everything they produce is just top draw. Like even just going from The Last of Us to The Mandalorian, I'm like, oh
yeah, it's a significant
Disney.
drop.
Like, oh yeah. But yeah, I've been trying to get into more TV lately. I think a good example, if we look at this, is DC. Like the latest announcement that they are doing both movies and TV. I think that says a lot.
Right.
Marvel are obviously trying that. They haven't been very successful at it, because they're just trying to make 6-hour movies. I think DC will be much more successful at that. But yeah, I think it's about using different mediums, but actually using them properly. Like Andor did, or not like Obi-Wan did. But the Mandalorian, it has been doing the episodic thing, but it still has somewhat of an overarching story. And this season, I think we have to consider we've only seen 35 minutes of the whole season.
Right.
And I've heard from just reading on Twitter that the second episode is like quite a bit better. There's more juice to it. So I guess we'll just have to see it.
Yeah, especially, the week-to-week basis, obviously, is always going to be kind of a hit-or-miss thing, because so many people were used to the binge model when Netflix introduced that, and I know I've talked about that recently, but as far as the whole week-to-week thing goes, yeah, I feel like it feels like it's benefited every other streaming service except for Disney, because like you said, the fact that pretty much every Disney thing we got in the wake of the Mandalorian, with the exception of the Mandalorian, they were trying to essentially make 6 to 8 hour movies spread out across several weeks. And I know for a lot of people that really irritated them. And I know I talked at nauseating length throughout the pandemic about how I'm like, they needed to have like a, what was the term? They need to have like a content coordinator or something, I believe is the term the Professor Pat dropped, where they had somebody who would look over each of their properties and determine whether it would be dropped all at once or whether it would be dropped week to week, similar to sometimes how Amazon does it, where Amazon will sometimes, if they have a new thing that they're trying to get out there, they'll just drop everything at once. And then if it's a success for like a future season, they'll air the episodes week to week. That's what they did with The Boys. But Disney is very much steered clear of that. They very much want to continue with the week to week models, because at least I'm guessing with whatever behind the scenes research that they've done, they found that that is the best metric for success as far as gaining new subscribers. Not that that's doing them any favors in the behind the scenes thing, because according to the financials, they are in the toilet as far as that goes. But yeah, Mandalorian's always, again, the exception, because it's the first thing they ever really did. So that's really the only one that still kind of abides by the episodic TV rules. But like you said, I'm glad that you keep bringing up Andor, because I guess the difference is that what sets this apart now and why Mandalorian has a little bit of a higher hill decline, besides the fact that it's not the only thing that people are tuning in to watch on Disney Plus anymore, is the fact that Andor essentially is that, again, we are living in a post-Andor world now, where Andor essentially did what HBO has been doing for years, where it was able to mix the traditionalist episodic TV format with the high level of prestige storytelling and craft that we've been getting for years from HBO and now recently from places like Amazon, Hulu, and Apple TV Plus, in order to make a just really, really amazingly well-crafted TV show that people wanted to tune in to watch per week, that people got invested in because of the characters, because they felt that there was a story that was going somewhere. And it didn't matter that it was ultimately inevitably leading towards something we already knew was going to happen with the events of Rogue One, because everything that we were seeing was just so awesome and well set up and well written and well entrenched, that then when you kind of have to go back to this, which is back to like video game level side quests that kind of just entertain you for 30 minutes with some cool action, you know? And
you
like,
really feel the length of the episode, 35 minutes. Oh, that's done. Oh,
right, exactly.
okay.
And not to mention the fact that, again, it's like you almost forget how short the episodes are too, because like, again, these are not, it would be one thing if these were like hour-long episodes, but they're not. It's always the typical Disney thing of like 30 to 35-minute long episodes with 10 to 15 minutes of credits, because they have to give credit to all of the thousands of VFX people that have worked on each one of these things, you know? And every single one of these episodes always comes to such an abrupt halt. You know, it also doesn't help that this episode ended on a cliffhanger too, which it's like, I mean, we'll break it down on a week-to-week basis as the episodes continue to come out, but it's like, yeah, so it already has those kind of things going against it. And also, just for this episode alone, I mean, we got what, like 2 cool action sequences? Like, I like the Starfighter fight. That was cool. But the beginning, when it's like, you don't know if it's a flashback or not, and they're inducting that new kid into
that was a good fake out.
It was a good fake out. I thought that was cool, because they very purposely cast that kid to look like a younger Pedro Pascal. And then this giant like crocodile thing comes out of the water, and I don't know, that opening sequence was a little bit too goofy for me in terms of like, yeah, it is pretty obvious that they're like stalling for time here, you know? And like we've talked about this before. I literally talked about this with Brandon 2 weeks ago when we were talking about Quantumania, which is like the idea of, it's like when especially with Disney properties, when you become aware that they are stalling for time because they do not have that much story. And the worst part is that opening sequence was just to reiterate it for people who may not have seen Book of Boba Fett, because I swear to God, I'm pretty sure they're copying word for word what the armorer told Mando in the second half of Book of Boba Fett when he's going to get Grogu, which is like, you know, you have to redeem yourself and in order, you know, because you took off your helmet. And so you have to redeem yourself in the eyes of the Creed. And this time, again, the new mission is, again, because they've completely retconned it, because they're like, oh shit, we can't have a Mandalorian show without Grogu, because that's part of the marketing efforts of the show. So they had Book of Boba Fett there in order to just get Grogu back with Mando. And, you know, forget the fact that the show was called Book of Boba Fett. And then they have now essentially created this new thing, which is where, okay, in order to keep Mando and Grogu together, because they're now bonded or whatever, he has to now go to Mandalore, which it's like, in the past, I would have been like, oh, cool, we're going to see Mandalorian in live action. And now I'm just like, whatever. You know, Mandalore has been conquered and retaken back and reconquered and retaken back so many different times in the animated sphere that honestly, and also at this point, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm past the point of like, oh, the live action shows catering to people who don't watch the animated stuff, because guess what? I have, and the animated stuff is still better than the live action stuff for the most part, except unless it's Andor. Andor is the only thing that still measures up to the animated stuff for me. So with that being said, what's it called? I think that's a good place to stop because I feel like we've said everything that we need to say about The Mandalorian. So what were your final thoughts and star rating for the premiere, Chapter 17, The Apostate?
I think it was a decent opening. I think it's the weakest opening of the 3 Mando seasons.
Yeah.
But judging by the trailers, it could be the best season. Like,
Right.
We really don't know what's gonna happen yet. It could be Mandalorian Civil War or something. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's Disney. Maybe they haven't figured out how to make this into a really great overarching season
Right.
type of show.
Or maybe they don't care about making it into a great overarching thing because now they have so many other things. They've essentially, again, they've done another cinematic universe where, again, even though Obi-Wan and Andor are their own things, Book of Boba ties directly into this, and the 2 other live-action Star Wars things that we're getting this year, Ahsoka and Skeleton Crew, are both also tying directly into this new universe, this post-Return of the Jedi era that they've set up. Again, they have all this time now in between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens, and if what they're doing on Bad Batch as well is to be believed, then again, I'm saying this, I'm calling this right now. I, for the most part, have not been wrong with my predictions, and at least since the movies, since they screwed up with the movies, which then again they are attempting to retcon and fill in and course correct for the new trilogy that we got over the last couple of years, which is that again the finale of Bad Batch is called Clone Force 99. They are talking in that show about the Kaminoans and how they want to use the Kaminoans to further cloning. So I'm like, okay, so this is setting up for the Palpatine comeback after he dies in Rise of Skywalker. I'm like, this is going to be their attempt in order to course correct for that. But the difference is that, again, the prequels, the difference is that what the Clone Wars did for the prequels versus what this new set of Star Wars shows are going to do for the new movies is that the prequels still were based in, like, I think some good original creative storytelling that were ultimately just weighed down by where Lucas wanted to focus his priorities, but those still felt like one core original focused vision, which is something I cannot say for the new movies at all. Every one of those movies felt like just so random and out there, and just like it was so deviating so hard from the previous one. Those movies do not feel cohesive together at all. So honestly, if they could pull anything off as far as correcting for those movies, bravo. I give them credit. But yeah, I don't know personally, But anyways, what your star rating?
I think a 3.5.
Yeah.
Like, it was good, but, I'm not going to shout about it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I feel about this as well. So let's move on to the thing that, again, apparently, like I said, we were on completely opposite sides of the fence on, which is Creed 3, which is that, yeah, I mean, I guess going into it, like the reason why I was looking forward to Mandalorian before was because, again, even though it had been a significant amount of time, I still had the force, the impact of season 2 and like that finale. And like at the end of the day, like season 2, man, that action was so awesome in that season, versus Creed 2, coming out of Creed 2, going into Creed 3, I'm like, not gonna lie, after how awesome that first Creed was and just how unexpected it was and just the fact of like how that brought the Rocky franchise essentially back from extinction, and also it was our introduction to Michael B. Jordan as this superstar, as this upcoming superstar, and Ryan Coogler as this rock star director, and how that led directly into him getting Black Panther, and which is essentially now kind of become like the last good sub-franchise of the MCU. And so, and then kind of, because Coogler obviously went over to Disney with Black Panther, that kind of left Creed 2 a little bit hanging. And like the Creed franchise has always been so weird because it's like, because everything has to be a franchise now. It's always weird because every Creed movie I feel like that we've gotten, I'm like, I feel like it could have just ended there. Like when Creed 1 ended, I'm like, okay, we can just end this here. This is good. And then Creed 2 comes out and the movie's, I'm like, that's all right. It's not as good as the first. It was always going to be disappointing compared to the first one, but like it was still serviceable. Stephen Cable Jr. directs that well. Stallone's clearly more involved in this. The plot is like, it's another Rocky movie, but this time it's with the juniors effect. They seem to be like doing exactly what the internet is making fun of them for, which is where they're just using Creed as the substitute in order to fight all of Rocky's old enemies. This time in the form of Ivan Drago's son, Victor Drago. And then that movie ended, and he leaves Philly. He moves to Canada to be with his son. Oh, they brought back Milo Ventimiglia from Rocky Balboa, which I thought, I'm like, okay, that's cool. That they continue to like actually pay more attention to the continuity of the Rocky franchise. And
shout out to Jess from Gilmore Girls.
Exactly, and for me, it's not Peter, the younger son. Peter from Heroes, and the dad from This Is Us, and a lot of other things that Milo Ventimiglia has done over the years. But so I thought that was cool. But again, that movie also, I'm like, yeah, this could have ended here. Why? Where do we need to go from here? And then I heard for a while that Creed 3 was going to happen, and that Michael B. Jordan was going to direct. But then we had to sit through COVID, and I'm like, okay, is this movie even going to happen? And then last year in the fall, we got the trailer for it, and I was blown away. I was like, whoa. I was like, I was not expecting this to be in this and to go in this direction. You know, I guess just because I was so surprised that they actually pulled off a movie set in the Rocky verse without Stallone or Rocky Balboa's involvement. So, like, take it from there, Luke. Like, walk me through your thoughts, like when that trailer first came out, like what your thoughts were.
So when that trailer came out, I hadn't seen any Rocky movies.
Wow.
But obviously, I knew of them. I knew the
Right.
tropes. I knew that he ended the Cold War.
Still one of the best bits of like behind the scenes movie trivia ever.
What is that? What trivia?
With Rocky 4, it's been a long running joke that the rewatchables have done, and a bunch of different people talked about how Rocky 4 ended. I think that's like one of the earliest like internet movie like behind like just fun theories to do is that like Rocky 4 ended the Cold War. It's just always funny when I look back at just how utterly ridiculous that movie is. Where I think that's the only bad movie that's so bad it's good that like I could almost make an argument that like I don't know, like I actually enjoyed that movie. I haven't seen that movie in years, but like the way that I hear people talk about that movie, as far as like people who watch it when it came out versus people who watch it now, you know, it's always a fun bit of trivia for me.
But anyway, I saw that trailer and I thought, "Ooh, this is really intriguing." Like you have these two childhood friends, and then they go at it at the end. Like, whoa, I'm in. Like I'm gonna watch every Rocky movie, every Creed movie, and I'll be ready. And then so I did, and I was very, very hyped, and it lived up to the expectation. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. It's so weird when we talk about the fact that, wow, an awesome trailer came out. I'm really excited for it. And the movie, albeit a few problems aside, I'm like, actually lived up to the hype. It actually was really good and really enjoyable and really fun. Like I was watching it last night. I was in the IMAX theater. And yeah, first of all, I mean, just the fights alone are insane. But like, I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, they made an actual good movie for theaters. I mean, granted, I'm being a little bit facetious here because for the most part, I think that I've been pretty satisfied with every movie that I've seen so far this year, at least the ones that I've seen in theaters. You know, Megan was a lot of fun. Infinity Pool was very intriguing. Knock at the Cabin was way better than I was expecting it to be. I think so far the only theater-going movie that was been disappointing was Quantumania, which got review bomb before that even had a chance to like really, you know, to really make an impact. But yeah, I mean, the slate of the few movies that we've gotten so far at the beginning of the year have been like really surprisingly impressive, you know, and then like because I think we're finally at this point where we're finally getting like Hollywood is finally adjusted in the post-COVID wave. They finally like figured out how to make movies again. And for the most part, I think again we're continuing after this trend in the fall, where for the most part every movie that I saw in the fall I was for the most part very, very excited about and enjoyed very much. And yeah, this was actually good, where you're right. When that trailer came out, I think I heard rumors that Jonathan Majors was going to be in it. You know, Majors is now like kind of the new superstar, you know, as Kang. And now that he's in this movie,
I saw someone call him the #1 draft pick.
They would not be wrong there, because and also he had a Sundance movie open in January called Magazine Dreams, which Kristen has told me he will more than likely win an Oscar for. And if it's anything like his performance in this movie, I will definitely see where he's coming from, because just the fact that like, okay, so first we got to break down the Marvel of it all, because again, it's a franchise movie, and naturally Marvel infects every franchise movie, which is again the fact that we've got two Marvel villains going at each other. One who was regarded as one of the best one-off Marvel villains ever, and another one who is being set up as the new Marvel big bad in the wake of Thanos. Eric Killmonger versus Kang the Conqueror. I've been joking about this since the trailer for this came out. I still think they missed a golden opportunity as far as marketing this goes, but that all of a sudden, that dynamic, I think, is seeped into their professional lives as well, not just within the movie itself, because you've almost got, in a weird way, like where Michael B. Jordan's career has gone to since the first Creed movie, you know, where he's got, like, Michael B. Jordan starts out as this child actor in the late 90s, early 2000s. You know, he's booking a ton of HBO roles, you know, guest spots on Sopranos. He's in that Keanu Reeves movie Hardball. He's got one of the most memorable and tragic arcs in the first season of The Wire, with his performance as Wallace, which has since become like an iconic HBO character performance. Then he's got this string of TV roles throughout the 2000s. He's on shows like Parenthood. He's on Friday Night Lights as one of the later show entries. And then once the 2010s roll around, he starts to make his transition into feature films. He's in Chronicle. He's in That Awkward Moment. But then people really start to pay attention to him with his first collaboration with Ryan Coogler's directorial debut, Fruitvale Station. He's in a movie called Red Tails. And then Creed is obviously his big breakout, but people forget that also he was in in a strange way, B. Jordan kind of pursued the exact same route as Chris Evans, which is kind of hilarious, where he's in yet another really bad Fantastic Four movie as the Human Torch before he's scooped up by Marvel. The only difference is that unlike Chris Evans, who got to play this iconic role as Captain America for 10 years, he's a one-off villain, albeit an incredible one-off villain, completed the trifecta.
A two-off villain, you might say.
A two-off villain, true, even though his cameo Wakanda Forever. But he is officially kind of, him and Coogler have kind of made their stance as the 21st century version of like the Scorsese De Niro, where every time you get these two working together, they're going to strike gold. And then COVID happens. And Coogler, so obviously, after Creed, I think he's got like a few other things, but for the most part, again, it's everyone's waiting for Black Panther because he's filming Black Panther. Black Panther comes out. That's a phenomenon. That's a revelation. And then he does one like kind of Oscar bait movie that kind of fails called Just Mercy, which I believe the only thing that movie succeeded was getting a SAG award for Jamie Foxx, and that was it. And then COVID happens and it kind of goes away. And we're like, well, what happened to Michael B. Jordan? I mean, it's weird because, again, we don't have movie stars anymore the same way that we do. But, like, I feel like Michael B. Jordan was, like, the closest thing that we got to that. I think with the exception of, like, this Tom Clancy adaptation that goes directly to Amazon called Without Remorse. He doesn't do anything. We don't see him. And now he's back for another Creed movie. This time he's directing it. But you have this other guy, Jonathan Majors, who kind of came out of nowhere, had been working in theater for a while, had been in a couple of small things here and there, but really kind of breaks out around the same time that B. Jordan goes away, because he's got Captive State and Last Black Man in San Francisco in 2019. Then he's in Lovecraft Country in 2020. Then he officially makes his first appearance in the MCU as Kang in 2021. And there's one other thing that he's in there, too, that I'm currently forgetting about. But so you have this kind of like... Yeah, thank you. Yeah, exactly. Devotion at the end of last year, which people thought he was going to get nominated for and then didn't. And now, like I said, even though it hasn't been released wide yet, he had Magazine Dreams at Sundance, which I heard, which again, people are already slating him to be up for the next Oscar. So you have this interesting dynamic already going on between the two of them behind the scenes, as far as like Majors almost being like the new kid on the block that's there to take Michael B. Jordan's spotlight. So you have that going on behind the scenes. And that's before we even actually get into the movie itself, which is where I don't know if this was like intentional, but like they almost kind of use that dynamic in order to fuel the direction that the story goes with how they introduce this new character and where they're taking Michael B. Jordan's character, and quite frankly, a direction that I was not expecting, and also was not expecting for them to go as dark as they did. I don't know. Well, I've talked enough. What are your thoughts on that whole thing?
Yeah, now that you bring that up, I think that is an interesting dynamic. And just watching interviews with them, they seem to be really enjoying each other's company. They've said that they want to work together a lot more often, like a De Niro and Pacino almost,
right.
Which I'm all for.
I'm for that. I am all for that if that happens.
Could be sensational. And yeah, I think they worked extremely well together in the movie. Majors, with his performance, Michael B. Jordan, he's giving good performance, but Majors is just knocking it out of the park. At the beginning, he's super sympathetic, like in that diner scene, like even with the small facial expressions. And by the middle of the movie, he's like this evil dude who's like come to take his life. So, and by the end of it, I didn't know who to root for. Like right. he's this awful guy, but you also really like him because it's right, Jonathan Majors. And it's like, oh my God, I don't want either of them to lose. But...
Right. It's so weird, like that, the dynamic they pull up, because again, just as far as Rocky goes, Rocky always had this. So because again, Stallone always has to be the hero in everything that he's in. Like you always had this cut dry dynamic of like, again, like, so who is the next crazy larger than life villain that Rocky's gonna face? Oh man, he faces Apollo again and he wins. Oh man, he's got Mr. T. Oh man, he's got this Russian monster. And then Rocky 5 is like such a step down that I'm still convinced that that's the reason why people didn't like that movie. And then Balboa comes out, and Balboa's really good. It's like kind of like a new reboot. But that movie almost like is an excuse to show Stallone being like, yeah, I still got it. It was like in this weird transition where he was getting older, but he wasn't quite old enough to be in like that, the twilight years of his life to start doing the Clint Eastwood thing. I know Clint Eastwood was kind of doing some similar things as well with his directing in the two, but Eastwood wanted to focus more on directing here. But what this movie pulls off, as far as not doing what I didn't like about Creed 2, which is the biggest thing that I didn't like about Creed 2 is that Creed 2 was essentially just another generic Rocky movie. It didn't have like the magic touch that first Creed did, But this one, and I don't know if this was B. Jordan just taking some notes from Coogler and the fact that Coogler is so good at what he does, and that B. Jordan has pretty much been there for every step of Coogler's journey. But he managed to tap into something that I didn't think was possible, which is where he managed to give a new lens to the character of Adonis Creed. He managed to pull back and show that maybe this character is not as squeaky clean as we thought. And like, he wasn't to begin with, he had a little bit of a rough upbringing, coming from the group home that he was in after the death of his mother and the fact that Apollo died before he had a chance to really take care of him. And then you have Apollo's widow coming in to essentially save him, and then you have everything that happens in the first Creed. But the fact that he takes it where you have this other character that came in from his past, and you're totally expecting it. You're totally expecting it to be this generic. Oh, this guy was a bad influence. Oh, they got into some rough and tumbles. They were boys, they were friends, they were brothers. But like, he was always getting in trouble. And then this was the one instance where where Adonis got away, but Damien took the fall. And it totally takes that and twists it on its head, where the movie opens up and you have the flashback that you see in the trailers where you have Donnie accompanying Damien to this underground boxing fight that he's going to, and you realize that, like, oh my God, like this kid Damien was supposed to be the next big thing. And if this tragic accident that happened that they slowly reveal as a result of their time together in the boys in the boys' home that he was in before Apollo's widow adopted him, like, this guy, I'm like, oh my God, like, Donnie kind of did steal this guy's whole life, and now he's been riding high off of the wave of success that he's had since revealing himself to the world, that like he's completely forgotten about his past. He's forgotten where he came from, and like, that's kind of a really interesting and different kind of a story development that, again, not only did I not see coming, but like really was the next jumping point that you needed in order to continue, in order to make this like as fresh and good as it was. And so when Majors Damien gets released from jail, and the arc that he goes throughout the movie, it's almost, I think, like comparable to Donnie's arc in that first movie, where Donnie's whole arc in that first movie is, he's got this chip on his shoulder. He's got the whole world ahead of him. He was ultimately given a lifeline from this horrific, awful situation that so many people find themselves in this country, and was essentially saved, but he just could not escape from this pull that he felt back towards this world of boxing, which caused him to seek out Balboa and pursue his father's legacy and all that. And now you have Major's character, who is essentially coming in to show, okay, this is what Donnie would have been like if he hadn't been saved by Apollo's widow, if he hadn't found Rocky, if he hadn't done that. I'm like, this is the dark side of Donnie's journey. And like, it almost does exactly what I love about like what I call the Dark Knight effect, which is like the perfect opposite of your character, where it's like, I'm like, this guy is everything that Donnie could have been, but the fact that like, the fact that like, he is like kind of this evil genius, but like, you still understand his motivation step by step. I don't know. Like, it's genius. I don't understand. I have no idea how they pulled this off, especially since one of the writers of this movie is Zach Balin, who I've been pretty disappointed by everything that he's done. He wrote King Richard, which was snooze fest, and he did some other HBO show that I thought was just kind of mediocre, but I'm amazed. I still don't know how they pulled this off.
I think it's simple. Like, it's a Rocky movie. It doesn't need to be extravagant, but they definitely made it. I think it's the most personal villain. I guess you call him a villain. I always call the Rocky characters opponents or antagonists, because they're not really villains. They're your boxing opponent. But this time he really does turn into a villain at some points, and that's great to see. But yeah, I think the personal aspect does add the most to it, because you're so incredibly invested. And like you mentioned, the dark side, Adonis, as you might call him, and there's that great shot of them before the middle fight where they looking at each other through the wall. Like, it's a little bit cheesy, but also it works really well. Yes, Michael B. Jordan thought, oh, this is a really cool shot, I'm gonna do this. And
yeah,
fair enough. I thought he definitely made the movie his own. I think Adonis he's building his own little legacy as a Creed franchise, and is trying to step out of the Rocky franchise, because I don't know, I didn't feel the absence of Stallone in this. I think it's evolved past the need for him to be there.
Right. I couldn't agree with that more, especially since, like, and it's funny because you even saw Stallone because Stallone just cannot let any franchise that he has essentially jump-started go because, and again, it's understandable because, you know, Stallone essentially like created Rocky from scratch. You know, he wrote that script and worked his ass off in order to try and get to it, you know, when he was broke and had no money. And, you know, he essentially created the Rambo franchise. He created the Expendables franchise. Stallone is very, very much attached and invested in all the franchises that he does. And so the fact that, like, again, like the fact that he was willing to let like his baby, the thing that made him who he is, go to this new wave, and now how it's kind of evolved past him, that in and of itself is already insane as well. And it just checked as well. So Coogler and Coogler and his brother Keenan wrote this along with Zach Balin. So that's probably where you get the personal aspect stuff from. But yeah, I couldn't agree with any of that more because like the fact that this franchise has turned into, this is Adonis Creed's franchise, you know, the fact that again, this is, they're like, this is a character piece, you know, this is about confronting your inner darkness. This is about, you know, like kind of what happens when this movie is all about when what happens when you forget about where you came from, when you forget, you know, when you kind of like start to get a little bit too high up there and cocky. And it's funny because I was having this conversation with my dad yesterday, and my dad said that he wasn't necessarily looking forward to this movie because he just doesn't feel the same. Now, again, my dad is probably the number one biggest Sylvester Stallone fan I've ever met. And like, he loves anything that Stallone does at all. And his big thing that he said as to why he wasn't a big fan of Adonis Creed as a character versus Rocky is that he's like, Rocky always had heart. Donnie's got a chip on his shoulder, and it makes him like less enjoyable to watch. And I understand that because again, there's a certain amount of sentimentality that I feel like older viewers like getting from their movies as opposed to us, you know, us younger people, where again, we want our characters to be morally great. We like it when our characters have a little bit of darkness. You know, we people our age, I feel, typically gravitate more so towards the villains and the bad guys and stuff because they just are always more interesting and more compelling. And that's what led to this wave of anti-heroes that we got on TV that sort of transitioned into movies for a bit. And I think this movie kind of gets back to that, which is why I enjoy it so much. Because again, as devious as Damien is in this movie, it does show that, like, Donnie is not exactly this best squeaky clean guy. You know, he's kind of arrogant. He's kind of full of himself. He's kind of just doing all this stuff because he thinks he can just walk on water now, you know, and this guy's here to take him down a peg, you know, prove that he can be humble again in a strange way. Kind of similar to what happened between Rocky 4 and 5, where as problematic as Rocky 5 was, I understand what they were going for in terms of Rocky is now at the biggest and highest that he has ever been, and he's got to be taken down a couple pegs, you know? And while this movie does not necessarily, I think this movie does a much, much better job in terms of how it handles that and its ending than with Rocky 5, I still think that it's kind of similar in the sense of where Donnie needs to be brought down a peg because he has ultimately forgotten where he came from. You know, he's this mega superstar boxing heavyweight champion of the world turned entrepreneur. He's got all these sponsorship deals and everything. But when you have this guy who is looking at him in his jail cell and is like, wow, that could have been me. Like, it just takes the chip on his shoulder to like a whole new level, you know? And not to mention the fact that, like I said, it's complemented by the B. Jordan Majors back and forth. And honestly, I'm with you in terms of that sense. If this is our new De Niro, Pacino actor duo that we get, more to them. You know, I just hope, my only hope is that we just get them in more original movies and not as much franchise stuff, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned, it is more of a step down for Adonis. And you need that, otherwise it's just the same thing over and over again. He has to battle his own inner demons to go out and beat the shit out of this other dude. Of course, that's channeled in the training scene. Or you gotta have the training scene.
Gotta have the
Well,
training
you can't have a Rocky movie without a training scene. You see him like he takes off the head guard when he's training with Victor Drago. He's like, "Come on, let's go." That's just always a cool moment when the training scene kicks off and they're like, "Okay, this is real now." And then the build up into the fight, and then the fight itself. I think we got to talk about the fight sequences, that they're really well executed. Some of the best of the franchise. I don't think we'll ever get anything that beats that long take from the first Creed, or that just moment when also in the first Creed when he just kind of wakes up. Like I just rewatched it now before we started this. So cool. But
I agree with that completely, especially because again, like B. Jordan directs this, right? And like I said, he's very clearly taken a lot of influences from Coogler and how he shot that first movie. But again, and this is a thing that's been circling around the internet as well, is that in addition to, and it's ironic because it ties into Mandalorian, because again, the two biggest things that I find that people our age are invested in and why they just can't get invested in movies is because it's two things they're obsessed with: video games, which is what applies to the Mandalorian, and anime. And as B. Jordan has said many, many, many times, he's like, he was heavily influenced by anime. And I have seen a maximum of, I think, 2 animes total in my entire life. So I can't necessarily say it. For me, it was like, yeah, but as far as like the action, the speed ups and the slowdowns, but like the way that they were hitting each other, when he's fighting Conlon in the opening scene, and then obviously, when Majors is boxing with the guy who he's back in, whose name I'm currently forgetting, the Spanish guy. And then obviously in the final fight, the way that they're hitting each other with how it's kind of slightly sped up, and then with the slowdowns, whenever you got the close up of them clocking each other on the sides, like that was all really well done. For me, I'm like, yeah, that's just like he's taking influence from Zack Snyder. But like, I don't know, as somebody who is officially almost done with Attack on Titan,
I'm done. I've caught up.
Oh, you finished it? Okay.
But there's the last. Today they released season 4, part 3, part 1. And season 4, part 3, part 2.
Netflix has got to stop with that. Like this is getting unbearable.
It's not Netflix.
Oh, it's not?
No.
Oh.
It's whoever does Attack on Titan. I'm not sure, but the final's coming in the fall.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah, that's the only one I've seen, but this definitely won't be the last. But even like anyone who doesn't watch anime can tell that there's some influences, like the close-ups on the eyes, or remember, I call this the Super Saiyan sequence where they enter their own little domain.
Yes.
There's like one shot that I remember where like the depth of field kind of like warps, and he goes like boom, boom, boom. I'm not sure if I'm remembering it correctly, but it was something really cool. And you got to add something new to the fight sequences, like add a literal cage behind you or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, make it a little fantastical. Why not? We haven't seen that before. Make it stand out. He is the director after all. Of course, he's gonna spice it up a bit, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was really well done. My whole thing is, it's like, again, I don't watch this out. Again, I don't play video games. I don't watch anime, but whenever it is implemented in my favorite medium, that my favorite storytelling medium, that being movies, I always appreciate it, because again, the reason why we so much at the time those direct adaptations of stuff sucked was because it was being adapted by people who had no knowledge and no understanding of the material that they were adapting, and therefore would always trying to implement this like really terrible Hollywood approach, and it would always end up sucking. But now that you have this new wave of creatives who are heavily invested in this stuff and very much enjoy this, Again, B. Jordan, I didn't know he was an anime fan, but honestly, it doesn't surprise me, considering how many people are fans of anime. For me, the biggest reason why I can't get into anime is because, again, I'm sorry, I don't want to watch them taking 20 minutes long to throw a punch. I'm sorry, I don't. I'm used to quick punch action, and it's ironic.
I will show one thing that you will recognize from the movie, which I thought was really cool, which is apparently this from also Dragon Ball Z.
Yes.
You've heard of Dragon Ball Z.
I have heard of that. Yes, and but the thing is that like that's not the first time that's been used, because again, if we're gonna go really quick, that was a thing that like they did in Rocky 2. That's exactly how Rocky 2 ended, when Rocky and Apollo knock each other out, and they're fighting to see who can climb up first, and Rocky climbs up first before Apollo does, like that, like so that's not necessarily something I'm like, okay, where did that actually come from? Because you always see that happen on the internet, where you're like, oh, this came from this thing, which came from this thing, and I'm like, are we sure we're getting that order of who adapted this from this, got that right, So like that
I just thought it was cool.
I mean, it's cool as shit.
It's slow-mo, it's symmetrical, it takes them out of that Super Saiyan sequence. It was a nice way to, like, ooh, we're in round 12 now, right, by the way.
And like, again, I'm not somebody who like is going to pretend that like I don't incorporate anime, slogans and terms into my everyday language, because again, it's I always make jokes about One Punch Man, and like Super Saiyan and stuff like that, because again, all my friends have done that, and I'm naturally going to do what they do, because that's what people do. But yeah, it's like I said, the point being is that the influences from these two mediums that for the longest time have not been done well are finally seemingly being done well, and in the way that they should be doing, So it's like, while this is not an anime movie, the fact that he made this such an important part of the marketing, knowing exactly who it was going to appeal to, and the fact that it worked out as well as it did, that's the stuff that I respect and appreciate him for. And The only really thing that I have left to add to this conversation is, can we please be done with these movies now? Like I said, every single one of these movies has ended in a way where I'm like, okay, we don't need another one. You know, Creed 1 ended. I'm like, okay, we don't need another one. Then we got Creed 2. Then Creed 2 ended. And I'm like, okay, we really don't need another one. And then we got Creed 3. And I'm like, oh, fine, whatever. And then this movie is actually really good. But the way this movie ended, I'm like, please, for the love of God, can we be done with this stupid franchise now? You know, like I love it. I love every single movie in this franchise in its own way. I think it's one of the only franchises where even the weakest ones I don't really have that much of a problem with. But that being said, can we please be done? Like, we got it. We you know, we get it.
Apparently, there's a fourth coming. So he has said.
Never mind. I give up. I give up. That's what this is now. It's just franchises. We can't get it. I was about to say, like, could you imagine if we got an original boxing movie? What a concept, you know? But I guess the difference is that whenever we get an original boxing movie, we get something like Bleed for This, which was good, but nobody watched it. So yeah, I don't know what to say. Well, I don't know. You know, Miles Teller is a pretty big star now after Top Gun. So who knows? Maybe if Bleed for This came out now as opposed to when it did, maybe more people will watch it. But who knows? You know, but like, it's funny. I was listening to this on Rewatchables, but like, do you remember Southpaw with Jake Gyllenhaal? Remember that movie?
I remember it. I haven't seen it.
Right, exactly. But my point being is that like that movie came out in theaters. I saw it in theaters in 2015. That movie would never get made now. Ever. It would have to be adapted or tied into some greater overall existing franchise, because that's the thing about movies.
Today I saw a video of Jake Gyllenhaal doing a weigh-in at UFC.
Right, for the thing for Roadhouse going directly to Amazon.
Oh, well, yeah. There you go.
There
I
you
didn't
go.
know it was
exactly. But again, that proves my point as far as like we can't. It sucks because we still are capable of getting awesome movies, but not unless they are eventized and part of this like gigantic already existing franchise as part of the American corporate movie making machine. Because it's funny, I was talking to one of my friends from the acting school where I attend now, and he was like, yeah, I was telling him, I'm like, yeah, I have this understanding with most American movies that American movies are no longer movies. They haven't been for a while. They are products. And so when I go in, I am reviewing things as products. And that is essentially what they are now. You know, now, while this was leaning slightly more so towards being an actual movie, it is still, unfortunately, a product. But with that being said, I still very much enjoyed it. I give it 4 stars. I had a lot of fun with this movie. I really, really enjoyed it. Luke, what about you?
Yeah, I give it 4 stars as well. It's the first movie of the year where I thought, oh, yeah, let's go. The movies are back.
Oh, not Cocaine Bear?
I haven't seen Cocaine Bear.
Oh, you got to watch Cocaine Bear. Cocaine Bear is just so much. It's, you know what it is? That movie is just so much dumb fun, where it's a movie that just knows exactly what it is, doesn't care at all, and just gives no fucks, and it's exactly what the trailer promises, and it's hilarious as a result.
And I watched Plane today, and I knew I was going to love it. That's just such a cater to me movie.
It's another movie where, again, they know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly who they're marketing, who their audience is. They know exactly what they're marketing for. More movies like that, please. I just wanted to acknowledge.
There's a Plane sequel. It's called Yacht or something. Or
Yacht. That's how you know that they just have like completely run out of ideas for titles. But yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge the 2 people that showed up in the chat. Thank you, Perp Minded and Jacques Eck, for showing up in the channel. It was a blast having you guys on as well. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Talkin TV podcast. Like I said, this is only the beginning of March Madness. We'll be back next week. I'll be joined by Kristen and Dustin to break down the final half of You Season 4, as well as Scream 6. In the meantime, Luke, thank you for joining me today. Where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
You can follow me on Luk_Reviews on the Instagram, but also on my YouTube. I actually uploaded a little 5-minute Creed video. Like,
nice.
Enough, I banged it out in one day. Trying shorter formats. I think it's working. We can leave the longer format to more special. But then another video is cooking, something Kingsman and Bond related.
Nice. That's what I like to hear. Especially because, again, Apple TV Plus, Henry Cavill and Matthew Vaughn, Argyle, it's coming out later this year. So
I hope so.
They've said that it is set to be released this year, so I'm just waiting for a release
that's good.
Date, you know. And that's another thing that I forgot. Apple TV Plus is releasing Tetris finally.
I'm so excited.
Which has been like, again, I've been talking. Dustin has been talking to me about this movie for literal years, to the point where I didn't think it was actually coming out, and now it's finally coming out. So we will finally have something to review there when that comes out. We'll be talking about that once Dungeons & Dragons for a little bit. Once Dungeons & Dragons comes out at the end of the month. But you can follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to follow the official Talkin TV podcast across all platforms. Be sure to subscribe to this channel on YouTube. Be sure to follow us on all of our social medias of the same name, at Official Talkin TV Podcast. This episode will be available to listen to on Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And for myself and Luke, you guys know the drill. 12 seasons of a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next time.